Let's just set the tone and obviously just indicate how important oil is to Gabon, because just looking at the numbers, 80% of exports, 63% of government revenues, it is extremely important, I would assume.
Well, it's basically a mono economy. It's oil or nothing, which basically makes it very susceptible to boom-bust scenarios. So for as long as the oil price is good, the Gabonese economy will continue ticking along quite nicely. But with oil reserves likely to run out within the next decade, there really needs to be a push towards economic diversification and making that transition into a post-oil economy. Otherwise, they are going to run into some serious problems.
Has there been any positive developments when it comes to that diversification? Because just looking at some research, into the diversification efforts, they've looked at timber, mining, ecotourism. Of course, they've got a lot of timber out there, but their efforts haven't really gone that far.
Progress has been forthcoming very incrementally, but not nearly as quickly as it needs to happen. That 10-year window is not a long time at all. We've also had a bit of political controversy following the death of longtime ruler Omar Bongo, the accession to power of his son Ali Bongo. But I think there has been a push now towards making these changes, developing infrastructure and attracting FDI in a lot of these sectors, industrial metals, manganese, timber, agribusiness, ecotourism, as you mentioned. But those efforts need to be scaled up quite significantly.
10 years, it's a very short time, as you say. Politically, is there the will behind investing in these new sectors, understanding the pace at which they need to invest and attracting these foreign investors into core sectors, which perhaps, of course, then you have to give up ownership? Is the will behind this diversification?
Well, going on Gabon's track record historically, the management of the economy has been extremely poor. So the track record is not very positive. The president has just reshuffled his entire cabinet, purging a lot of the old guard. That raises hopes that there could be some progress in this sense. But that's the million-dollar question, whether they will be able to make these changes as quickly as they're required to.
This is very, in terms of population density, is one of the least population density, I don't know how you'd say that, but there's not a lot of people living in Gabon relative to the size of the economy and its wealth. GDP per capita sitting at $10,500. How are the people feeling about changes right now? Because there has been a lot of social unrest, rioting. Is there a sense that you could have a situation like in the Arab Spring countries playing out in Gabon? Could we get to that situation right now?
I think Gabon's quite interesting in the sense that even though it's not very democratic or it's not very politically mature, it is politically stable. So even after the whole controversy in 2009 with the election, and even now with the boycotted 2011 legislative elections, you haven't really had a major spike in political tension. The tension that you're more likely to see is from trade unions who have issues with the policies that the government are likely to implement. The threat of civil unrest, I don't think, is something that investors should be concerned about at this stage.
In terms of the currency and inflation, of course, two factors that are very, very influential on African economies. Is this a problem in Gabon?
In Gabon, the problem is very much mitigated by the fact that it uses the CFA franc for Central Africa, and the bank of, a common central bank which guarantees the convertibility of the CFA franc and maintains monetary discipline through managing low inflation, mitigates against a lot of these risks. So inflation is sub-trend for Africa, coming in at 3.4% or scheduled to come in at 3.4% for this year. Also, you don't see the wild swings and volatility in the currency because of the fact that the French Treasury guarantees the liabilities.
Okay, so let's look at it from a foreign investor perspective right now. Relative attractiveness of Gabon versus its other peers in West Africa, Ghana, where we have growth rates far exceeding 5%, which is the target for Gabon this year, and of course Nigeria, the most populated nation in Africa.
It's interesting. You look at Gabon purely from a balance sheet perspective. It's a net creditor. It runs fiscal and current account surpluses. In this day and age, with all the debt problems we have, that's pretty much unheard of. the external debt is extremely low, inflation's low. So from that perspective, it looks great. There is scope with the natural resource endowments to grow the economy aside from the oil sector. But the operational environment is extremely tricky. It's ranked 156 out of 183 countries in the World Bank's ease of doing business. It's got to address socioeconomic inequalities. So you've got the trade-off between a strong economy on paper, which is growing quite well, versus a very, very tricky task in rebalancing the economy more towards the non-oil sector.
And of course, they have to do that at a very quick pace. What influence does France have on Gabon right now? Because it was a previous colonial power in Gabon. Are there still strong ties
There's
between
still
the two?
very strong linkages. Gabon, as you mentioned, is a former French colony. I've mentioned the CFA franc zone, the currency peg, and the fact that the liabilities are guaranteed by the French Treasury. In light of all the drama in the Eurozone, people have asked whether this relationship would be under threat, whether there'd be a depegging from the currency. Very unlikely, in my opinion. The relationship will continue to be strong. There are very strong trade linkages between Gabon and France.
So positive influence on the economy.
Certainly.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us today.